In this video, I'm going to show you how to create a multiband compressor using a free plugin. I'm going to load Waves Studioverse, and within Studioverse, I'm going to select a multiband split. So this gives me two bands divided by frequency. I'm going to increase that to 3. On the first band, I'm going to select the C1 compressor, although it could be any compressor, preferably with a sidechain option, which we are going to use a bit later. For now, let's keep it set to the internal sidechain. Let's play a drum loop. Now we can set the compression by lowering the threshold and increasing the ratio. At the moment, I'm only affecting the low band. Now, if I copy this compressor to the other bands, I already have a multiband compressor. Let's look at all 3 compressors. Now we can see that each one is compressing a different range. We can solo each one. So that's the mid-range one. We can play with the threshold. I'm now going to assign macros so we can easily manipulate these 3 compressors without having to go to each one and change the settings. So for the threshold of compressor 1, I'm going to add it to macro 1. Macro 2 will control the threshold of the second compressor, and number 3 will control the threshold of the third compressor. Let's look at compressor 2, which is the mid-range. Now, if I increase the value of the macro, the threshold goes up, which is kind of the opposite of what I want. So I'm going to reverse those controls. So now, as I increase the knob's value, the threshold goes down, becoming more sensitive, therefore compressing more. So that's one thing I want to do. The other thing is the makeup gain. So I want to make up for the reduced gain. So I'm going to assign the respective makeup gains to the next 3 controllers. So now if I look at makeup gain number 2, I can increase the level. So that already, let's unsolo. That already gives me a lot of control. Now, with the first 3 macros, I can control the compression for each band. So this will be the lows, the mid, and the highs. Now, since I'm reducing the gain for each band, I will have to compensate for that with a makeup. Let's call it low, mid, high. If I'm not compressing at all, I can use this as a form of EQ, because I can just boost the mids or the highs. But with the compression, it becomes very effective. So now I'm just compressing the highs, so basically I've created a form of de-esser. I can compress the lows a little bit. Let's try another loop. Yeah, here we have quite a bit of lows. So I can tame the lows. I can actually boost the level of the mids to bring the snare up. And I can then compress the mids to control them more. Let's try another loop. So this one is somewhat thin and lacking something in the lows. I can just boost the gain and then compress it just a bit. So I'm creating something which is much more controlled. I can boost the highs. Now, in this case, I want to move the cutoff point from 500 to something a bit higher. So I'm controlling just the highs or the treble, and then I'm going to compress it more. So now we have less energy because we're going higher. I can boost it more. And if I wanted to, I could compress the hell out of the mids and bring the gain up. So I'm creating something which is much more solid. Let's hear it on another loop just with these settings. Yeah, so here we have a lot more highs. I can bring the makeup gain down. I like the compression on the lows. Maybe too loud in general. And I need more mid. I'm just selecting random loops here. This is nice. So just as a rough EQ, it's very, very effective. And compression. More lows. Tight. Let's bypass the whole thing. And in. Yeah. I'm just going to stay with these settings and just go through different loops. Because I like the tightness, but it's not, you don't hear the pumping as much because each band is moving almost independently, although they're playing the part of the same pattern or the same part. Let's bypass. In. I like adding really compressed mids to drums, to guitars as well for that matter, and bass. Compressing the mid is a very effective move, usually. So basically up to now, what we're doing is we're relying on each band's threshold sensitivity, which means that what the compressor is seeing for each band is, for the lows, it's seeing that band, and the mids and the highs respectively. What I want to do now, I want to give all the bands the same input. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy these compressors to the next slot. I'm going to bypass the first ones, and on each one of the new copies, I'm going to select the external sidechain input, and I'm going to select Studio Rack input, which means now each compressor's detector will look at the level coming into the entire Studio Rack plugin, which means it sees the input before we split it into the three bands. We have an indication that it is looking at an external sidechain. So let's set the same to the next one and the next one, sidechain and Studio Rack input. So now we're dealing with three wideband detectors, each one compressing its respective band. Let's hear what it sounds like. So now you can see as I lower the threshold, each one of the gain reduction meters show me that the compression is identical on all three compressors. Now I can change the makeup gain because I'm compressing quite a bit. Now I can play with the threshold of each one, but the behavior will be very, very different. Because the low frequency is also, I can solo it, but it's also moving according to the hi-hat. The hi-hat here and the snare are very loud. So we can see it's moving quite erratically. So it's not just compressing the kick, it's compressing everything, but we're hearing it on the low band. So this is very effective because obviously we get more compression. I can compress the highs even more. To tame them. And then I can really play with the makeup gain to make it, to achieve the balance I want out of the three bands. Let's just flick to another loop. Bypass. I like the tightness. So here we are gonna hear the pumping because everything is moving together. We can change each one to compress independently by switching off the sidechain. But there's something about that kind of harsh compression, but still with the ability to change each band's threshold and makeup gain that gives a lot of control. Now what I want to do is I want to create a switch where I can flick between those two configurations. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a macro to control, let's use the last macro, to control the bypass of these three sidechain compressors. At the same time, let's go to our non-sidechain compressors and select the bypass on those. Now I have a list of the bypass state controlled by macro 8. If I move macro 8, you can see that all 6 compressors turn on and off. But I want to reverse the state of the 3 first ones. So I'm starting, so when the knob is turned all the way down, the non-sidechain compressors are active. And once I pass the half point, they switch off and the other compressors kick in. So let's try that. We can listen to something here and hear the difference. These are the non-sidechain compressors. You can see that the gain reduction moves independently for each one. And now when I switch to the common sidechain compressors, you can see that the gain reduction for all 3 is shown as moving together because that's what it does. We get a tighter sound, but we get more pumping. Again, let's hear the difference. So this is quite compressed, I would say, but there's still more movement because each band is compressed separately. And this is the common sidechain. Not sure which one I prefer on this loop, to be honest. They both sound really good. Let's hear it through different loops. You can see and hear that there's not much lows here, so the first band is not doing much. There's a lot of hi-hat, so it's getting compressed. When I switch to the second configuration, we get equal compression on all of them. It's not quite equal because the threshold on the lows is not as sensitive as the other ones, which is fine, but still it's much more effective. Let's change to another loop. Again, separately. The low band gets compressed only by the kick, as opposed to here, the kick is the most dominant thing. So all the bands get compressed by the kick, and we will get more pumping eventually. So this is this method. I'll have the Studioverse preset available. This will work on any compressor. Obviously, in order to have both compression methods, we will need whatever compressor we use to be able to have external sidechain input. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, you know what to do, and I'll see you on the next one.